too hot for me to wear the sweatshirt most of the time right now. But when I put it on for this, I was just getting so excited. I was like, oh, yay. Hello, everybody. For today's video, we are back from a summer break, and we are going to be chatting about some fall recommendations, specifically some cozy books, some witchy books. Before we jump into the book content, though, since it's been so long, we thought we would do just a brief little catch-up session. And Kristen and Roger both have had some good things happening, so I'll go ahead and let them start. Roger, it's been so long that you've been wanting these things to happen, so I feel like you should go first.
Okay, well, after 8 months, my job search has finally been successful, and so I got my first job after my PhD starting September 30th, so we're moving back to Northern California in a week. So it's been all of the exciting, but also like stressful, like figuring out new renter's insurance and moving and rent movers, and I'll finally get to see all my book babies again, though they've been so lonely and in climate controlled storage for like a year and a half. So I finally get to have them back, and I get to do my shelves, and my husband has promised me that the first thing I get to buy is new bookshelves. So
that's exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's been so long and so many annoying. Your interview process for each job that you got callbacks for was so intense. It would be like you'd have to fly out and do these all day long interviews and presentations only to just not hear anything.
Yeah, at this level, it's 3 or 4 rounds. Usually you meet with a recruiter, and then you meet with the hiring manager, and then you do an on-site, which starts with a 45-minute seminar that you have to give about your work. And then they have time for questions, and you do 6 to 8 interviews after that for 5 or 6 hours probably. And then one of the places flew me up and back the same day to Northern California and back. So it ends up being like a 14 or 15-hour day.
Oh my God, that's exhausting.
And then they do the ghosting game where they just sometimes won't even respond for over a month, even after they spent hundreds of dollars to fly you out.
That's wild.
And even though I feel like the way you worded it, where you said you finally have a job, you've been working. It's not like you've just been sitting around. You have all the time in the world. You know,
No,
you
have
have to
been
fit
doing
all
a
this in.
yeah.
Yeah, fitting all this in within what you currently do, which is a busy full work day anyway. But then Kristen, I just found out, also has exciting news.
I'm also moving. My husband and I found a house in this town that we originally had been looking for houses in, and it's basically like Stars Hollow. It's so cute there, and I love it so much. And we're going to be 3 blocks away from my brother, which is going to be really exciting. Nice. Yeah.
You have what is basically your dream bookshelf setup right now. Is there a spot in the new place that you'll be able to have that in?
So I'm actually going to have an entire library room, which I'm really excited about. Because right now I have that wall like in our living room. So the one thing that I'm trying to figure out is like the ceiling heights and stuff, because there are areas where it's sloped. So I don't think I can fit the 96-inch ones that I have now. So I'm debating either doing like a wall of those on like the one where it would fit, and then doing like built-in bookshelves around. But no matter what, I just want the entire room to be just bookshelves on every wall.
That's so exciting. My shelves in here go up quite high. I feel like you never would know because you never have them in frame. But they are like perfect. There's only 3 because the room's not that wide. And it's not actually that tall, but when I measured so many times before I got them, because I was like, I think it is perfect, but I just, if it's not, I'm going to lose it. You have to like scrape the ceiling. I'm going to be so sad. So when we got them, I was so nervous, and then they fit perfect. This room, this is my exciting news. I recently took the doors off of the closet in this room and put some shelves that I got from Big Lots. They're not tall shelves. I just put shelves, and then I like stacked them on top of each other and mounted them. And that's where like manga and comics are going now. So this room is just like a random mix of different kinds of shelves. None of the shelves match. These ones are black. Those ones are brown. And then I have one that looks kind of like yours, Kristen, where it's the wood with the railings.
Mm-hmm.
So it just kind of looks silly, but I'm like, whatever. It's books. That's the exciting part.
True.
I'm so
Roger,
jealous.
do you know what you're getting?
No, I haven't looked yet because I have to do all the measuring stuff because we got a 2-bed, 2-bath, but we don't really need the second bedroom. So the second bedroom will be my library / when guests come over, we'll have to figure some air mattress or food, whatever. We'll figure out something.
The cat room.
No, but the cats are getting the second bathroom. Alex is like, that's where their litter box is going to go. So they get their own bathroom now, along with their water fountain and their robotic litter box and they're very spoiled.
That'll be nice for them and an upgrade for everybody all around.
Yeah.
We need to get a bigger cat tree again because we got a small one for this apartment because we're currently in a 400-foot studio. But Jujubee doesn't fit in it very well. So you just see her kind of like hanging off the side of it sometimes. And we're like, we'll get you a real cat tree again when we move. We promise.
Aww.
Luna fits in her bed, but she often chooses not to, where her butt will be in the bed and then she'll just be laying in ways that don't make, or she'll be laying off the side where she looks like her neck is broken because there's like the little ridges on it, like almost like armrests. Her neck will just be hanging off. You're like, that can't be comfortable. Anyway, all fun, exciting updates aside, we'll jump into book stuff, more specific book stuff, and not just talking about bookshelves. But we are going to be, as I said, chatting about cozy and witchy books. We're planning on doing another video where we focus maybe more on scary things and books that have maybe more death magic and that sort of topic within them. But we each have 5 to 10 books to talk about because we figured there's probably going to be some overlap. But Kristen, since I feel like you know so much about the cozy, what is your first recommendation?
So I really went with like the witch angle. So the first one that I have to recommend is A Discovery of Witches, which is definitely like an older book, an older series, but there is a 5th book that just came out in July. So I feel like it is a good time to get into it if you haven't already. I feel like it's not really talked about as much as it used to be. And it probably is because it's older, but it essentially is like romantasy before romantasy was really a genre. So it follows a witch named Diana, and it mostly takes place at the library at Oxford. So it also has that like academia vibe going for it, which is nice. And while she's there, she accidentally calls up this manuscript that it has been lost for like centuries. She's one of the only people that has managed to be able to like call it up. And as soon as she does, it ends up that like all of these supernatural creatures kind of feel like the magic surface. And then it causes like a huge stir in the underworld. And all of these people are basically trying to track her down, try to track the book down, or just try to like learn the knowledge that she got from the book. And she kind of teams up with this vampire named Matthew. And it's a really cute, really good book. And it was originally a trilogy, so it's called the All Souls trilogy. And it's also been adapted in the UK, and you can watch it on Netflix. I'm actually watching it right now, which is why it was top of my mind.
How do you feel the adaptation does?
I think the adaptation is great. I was actually surprised at how good of a job they did.
Is this the one where the author is actually a professor? Is that right?
So. Yeah, that sounds right.
Because that I feel like is the only thing I know about that book. And I'd heard there might be some romance angle to it, but I didn't know how prevalent that was within the story.
It definitely has like a big focus on history. So if you like anything historical, you'll definitely enjoy this. And it definitely is also written in an academic sense. So it's, I would say, very high quality romantasy, and probably a little bit less romance than you would want. But there is like a decent amount of it, but definitely like the magic and everything is very, very fleshed out. That's not like, doesn't take a backseat to the romance.
I will be reading it because that is her, because she doesn't like it when the romance takes over. She wants the magic to be fleshed out, and I'm the same way.
Yeah,
I don't mind if it's a significant part of the story, but the other elements are still done well, even if they don't get as much, 50-50, maybe it's more like 60-40, 65-35, but for me, it's like when it's just, we all know when it's kind of turning into the most marketable form of fantasy romance versus this sounds like what Roger said, like what I would like, because it seems as though it's not as concerned with fitting into the trends, and it's just the story it is. So I'm really glad you brought it up, because I've always wanted to know more about it, and I see it at my local bookstores pretty often, the used ones, since it is a little older, but I've never tried it, and now I really want to. But I'm like, oh, my TBR is already so long. It sounds like the perfect fall book, though.
Yeah, it's very well written.
Roger, can you follow that up?
Well, the first one, I mean, I also started Witchy. So the first one I'll talk about is Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. It's very kind of like early 2000s CW vibes, where it's kind of melodramatic. There's kind of like this central mystery, but it feels kind of like Buffy, but with witches. And that is kind of my jam, because I love Buffy and all of the like super dramatic Charmed and all of that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like that, especially the first book, because there's kind of this central murder mystery kind of plotline that's happening. The second book follows a lot more of like a witch huntery vibe, because it's our world and the witches are kind of like secluded and they kind of have this secret society. And then there's these different forces that are trying to like mess with them. And then I think it's only supposed to be a trilogy, but the book 3 hasn't come out. They just released like a random novella that's like a historical one that I haven't read yet, Queen Bee. But I have read the first 2 books in the series, and I quite like them both. But it is definitely like that kind of melodramatic, like The Covenant, or like some of those like movies that were coming out in the early 2000s that are kind of more aesthetic than they are necessarily fully realized plots. But sometimes that's enough for me to just have fun with it. And since we were talking witchy vibes, it definitely is witchy vibes.
I had seen a lot of people really liked that first one. I hadn't heard much about the second, though.
It's quite different, because the first one is much more like small town kind of murder mystery, I think, which is what people really liked about it. And then the second one changes a little bit, because then you have kind of like the witches versus the witch hunter kind of vibe, which is not the same thing, but I still had fun with it.
It sounds like a you book.
Yeah, I love Buffy, so I need to definitely check that out.
I watched Charmed because my sister watched Charmed. And my sister's 5 years older than me. So I don't know if I really remember that much. I just remember at some point there was like another sister. And for some reason we were like, it's not the same or something. I don't remember. That's all I remember. I remember what they look like. But
I'm
I don't
pretty
remember
sure
much
there
else.
was like fighting or something. Like I think Shannon Doherty didn't get along with the rest of the cast, so they made it that like that sister moved away, and then another sister that didn't exist until then moved in.
Oh,
they killed
and
her
then wasn't
oh, they killed her.
the...
Oh, okay. I knew something. I couldn't remember. I watched it too. Like when I was younger, we actually used to like play Charmed on the playground, like pretend to be witches. But I used to love that show, but I don't really remember that much of it.
Well, don't get me started, because I'm the one that has like a full recreation of the Book of Shadows that I bought right after high school. So it's like this full-sized obsessed.
That's so cool.
The actor, am I mistaken? The actor that was the love interest in Buffy, he was in Charmed too, right? Wasn't he like in an on-again, off-again relationship?
I don't think so.
Who am I thinking of? There's like a love interest that pops up, and they have a very rocky relationship.
His character's name is Andy. I don't know the name of the actor, but
yeah, the one that was dating Piper.
Probably. I don't remember very well. Okay, so I'm also going to start Witchy, and I feel like this is sort of quintessential cozy and witchy. And is anyone surprised? It's the Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, which Roger abbreviates to. Yeah, I was pretty sure. That's why I was like top of my stack, because I was like, I feel like it's so cute, but Roger always he can't remember the full name, so if he is talking about it with us in some kind of message, he'll just say like Irregular Society. Society that needs like some laxatives to keep them going. Anyway, this is a super cute found family story that is definitely in the realm of what I feel, Roger, the one that you absolutely love. And I'm totally House in the Soyan Sea. I spaced for a second, but it is definitely within that blueprint. I would say you follow a young woman who is a witch, and she's living in our world, but witches aren't known to actually exist. And she ends up being hired to teach these 3 young orphan girls how to control their witch powers, because if they don't learn how to get them under control, then there's risk of them being caught. And the people that are caring for them are so cute and so wholesome. And one of them in particular may or may not be the love interest in the story. And he's very protective of the kids. And the little girls, they all have various different personalities. And some of them are really sweet. One of them's really feisty. And they're all so precious. And I loved it so much. And I thought that the love story within it as well was quite cute.
Me
It's
too.
so cute.
I felt like that was another one where I think it's published by Berkeley, which is like traditionally a romance imprint, but I felt like the romance really like took a backseat in that one too. And it was really like found family and like being comfortable in your own skin.
I'm sad because unless I'm wrong, I could have sworn this author's next book that was in the same sort of territory was going to be released this year, but I think it either got pushed back or I was wrong the whole time and it was always meant for 2025. But I remember when I first...
It was supposed to come out in December, but I think it got pushed back to 2025. Yeah.
Okay. Because it was last year that it was being announced. So I was so excited for it. And then
Me too.
When I was doing my anticipated releases prep, I was like, where is it? So not till next
sneaky
year.
about how they just like push stuff back. They don't
yeah,
say
the
anything,
Stardust...
yeah.
The Stardust
King.
Thief. Yes, we've been waiting for, at this point, years,
Like 2 years?
right? For that.
Yeah.
Which is weird because I felt that when the first one came out, there was a lot of hype. And then the cover got revealed not that far after. And then they did another cover reveal recently, but it's the same cover. So I was like, are we just pretending? Did I shift to a different reality or something?
They're like, those kids on the TikTok won't remember the last cover reveal.
Yeah, I guess so. Because Roger, you messaged me too. Like, didn't we already see this? Has this been out? I'm like, that's what I thought. So we just imagined the new cover all collectively somehow. Well, I'll go first now as we rotate back. And this next one is more so cozy, less witchy. It's kind of a classic booktube cozy recommendation, I feel, and that would be An Enchantment of Ravens. It even has perfect fall colors on the cover, but this one is a fae story, but you are following a human woman who is a painter, and she is tasked with painting something for one of the leaders of one of the fae courts, and she ends up painting very human emotions in him, and when his portrait is revealed to his court, they see those human emotions depicted as a weakness, especially because they feel if even a human was able to see that in you, then that really shows that you're not fit to rule. So he pulls her into the fae land and basically has her explaining herself. But also, even though you wouldn't think it, because it makes it sound like he's very irritable and quick to get angry, he's not actually. He's just very confused as to, like, why would you try to sabotage my rule? But there is a little bit of a love story between them. And it is very, I feel, more so folklore fae and less of the, oh, look, everybody's so beautiful and hunky all the time. There's actually a lot more to the setting, I find, and the trickery of the fae is definitely present in it. It's just a nice, fun little standalone, very cute, very quick page turner story, but it's a good, wholesome kind of weekend cozy read, I find. Which Roger,
you read that? I read it.
Yeah.
Like, I made the mistake of reading it maybe like a week or two after I had read The Cruel Prince. I got both of them at like a book expo long ago, and I just was such a huge Cruel Prince fan that Enchantment of Ravens didn't hit the same for me, but I keep thinking like maybe it just was the time and I need to give it another shot.
Well, I also find because Cruel Prince is very much about the wickedness of the fae, whereas this one, while it has those components to it, it feels more fairy tale. So it kind of has that, now we go to this place and then now we go to this place sort of feeling that fairy tales often have. Not that it feels like Alice in Wonderland, but it definitely has that. We're kind of zigzagging through the area as opposed to trying to deceive and be tricky and things like that. But I was going to say Roger officially has read a Margaret Rogerson work. So are you going to read this one soon? Are you going to do this one or Vespertine, do you think, next?
Well, I own Vespertine, so I think I own Enchantment Ravens of 2, but it's in a box somewhere. Who knows? But Vespertine's
a better October
to Everand at the end of the month, I think on the 25th. So I'll probably do that one first.
Isn't Vespertine supposed to be the first in a series though? And then she said that like never mind, she wasn't going to write anymore.
wasn't going to write anymore ever, or just
No,
for...
of
Oh, okay.
Vespertine. Because I think she wrote it during COVID, and she said it was like really difficult, and that she just couldn't go back to like writing it.
Oh, I don't know. It I think is written in a way where you can read it like a standalone.
Okay.
But it did seem like the world was a little bit more developed than maybe her other two, so there was room for there to be more. But you could read it as just one book. For me, I'm waiting for the Sorcery of Thorns spin-off series. That's what I'm waiting for. After Thorn Manor, where you... I don't want to say too much for anybody that hasn't read it, but Thorn Manor, I feel like, is sort of showing you another character where you're like, perhaps there's more to this character, and maybe we should have a whole story that goes from there. I've been waiting for Margaret Rogerson to write a series.
Me too.
But Roger, I was going to say, Vespertine is probably a better October read.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, Roger, you give your recommendation.
So something like for me, like fall is also kind of like nostalgic time because there's all the times and like all of the different traditions that people have. So one of the ones that just comes to mind with that kind of vibe is Dragons of Autumn Twilight. It's the first in the original Dragonlance trilogy, and also the cover is very fall vibes. But it's very classic quest fantasy where there's an inciting incident where it's also kind of fun because your characters are all older and they were friends before the start of the book, and so they're coming back together because they promised to meet in this inn on this certain date after a certain amount of time has passed. And so when they come back, they find that their hometown is not the same. There's some weird thing going on with these like lizard men that have kind of appeared, and then there's this barbarian priestess who pops up out of nowhere with a magic staff, and they kind of get thrust into this quest. So it's like very traditional, classic fantasy Dungeons and Dragons vibes, which I think are good for fall.
Because it has that nostalgic feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus,
that
cover could not be more fall.
Which one?
The top
first
left
one.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Those perfect colors.
It's so beautiful.
Is the setting very, would you say, significant in the story?
Where they start is, so this is like where they're coming back together in the town called Solace, which is in these huge trees where the inn is like built into the side of this huge tree, and it's like all these golden leaves and stuff like that.
So yes. I'm jealous. Can that be real? I want to go.
That would be nice.
Kristen, what's your next one?
My next one is also nostalgic, and it's one that people are probably very familiar with when it comes to the film, and that's Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. Also, again, a witchy one, but
because it was Nicole Kidman and Sandra Bullock or something.
Yes, and Stockard Channing is in it too, from Grease. She's like one of the aunts. I watch it like every single year. I actually already watched it again this year. But the book that it's based on is also really good. I actually read Practical Magic when I was in middle school, so it's been a really long time. But it follows two generations of Owen's women, but it really focuses on Sally and Jillian. They come from like a family of witches, and their family's always blamed for everything that goes wrong in their New England town. That's one thing about it. I absolutely love the setting. I feel like New England is just like quintessential fall. But ever since they were little, Sally and Jillian really wanted to get away from their aunts, like separate themselves from their strange kind of upbringing. So one of them does it through marriage, another one does it through running away, but then there's an event that occurs that brings them back together, and it's very witchy, very fun.
I'm stupid because I knew that book existed and I knew that movie existed, and for some reason I did not realize that they were the same thing.
Yeah, I think there's like more too. Like she wrote a couple of other ones, but from what I've heard, none of them are as good as the first book.
Are they part of a series, or is it just that they exist within the same world? Can you read them regardless of the order, or no?
I mean, I think that starting with Practical Magic would make sense because that was the first one that she published. And I think because of like the commercial success of it and the film, she went back and wrote about like different generations of the Owens women. So they weren't necessarily like planned out to begin with. It's just that she was maybe like capitalizing a little bit on the success of the first one.
What a cash grab. Boo. No, I'm just kidding. I always wonder when that sort of thing happens where you're wondering, is it that they didn't really plan on coming back, but it did well, so they're like, I might as well tap back into this? Or is it they always wanted to and then now they have the chance? You know what I mean? Because I'm like, I mean, I don't want to assume that they're just doing it for money, but also it kind of seems suspicious, especially when things come years and years later, decades sometimes later.
It could also be like pressure from the publisher.
That makes sense. Roger, you go again.
I guess the next one I'll talk about is Cemetery Boys, which is a YA choice. And it's about this trans male teen who's trying to prove to his family that he can be a brujo. So he wants to try to summon a spirit of the dead to show his family that he has this magic that is traditionally only in people assigned male at birth. And so he accidentally summons this dead ghost of a boy from his school, and they kind of end up kind of embroiled in this larger political situation between some of the different like witch families. And I just always enjoy reading kind of LGBT focused stories. So it definitely will have kind of the witch vibes with a lot of Latin flavor. And it's always just nice to read stories by trans creators because the author is also a trans man, and just kind of following along with that. It's definitely one of those ones though where I wonder if like originally it was planned as like a series, because it feels like where it leaves off there's much more room for more than usual, but I don't think he has ever planned to go back to it because he's been working on a different duology that's following like an Aztec Hunger Games style thing instead.
Is that other one you might have just said, and I might have just spaced? Is that other one middle grade, the Aztec one, or is it YA?
No, it's YA still.
It's YA. So I read Lost in the Neverwoods, which is by this same author, and it's a Peter Pan retelling. I didn't necessarily love everything about the book, but there's a part that's so devastating and moving that for that reason I'm just like, oh, I have to keep it. It just had a part that was so gut-wrenching. But I haven't read Cemetery Boys, even though I've heard really good things about that one. I'll go ahead and put, for anybody that's curious about Lost in the Neverwoods, because that's another one that you could read for fall. I feel like retellings are very nostalgic as well, but it's very sad. This one I felt like there was potentially, and I could be wrong, but it felt as though maybe the author was encouraged to put in the tiniest bit of romance, and I don't know if the author wanted that. Maybe they did, but it didn't feel like that was the focus. And maybe it kind of came across like we really didn't want to, but just kind of put it in because publishing was saying, oh, this does well in YA books or something. I don't know. But
he definitely always has like a small romantic subplot, at least in the two I've read, because I read the Sunbringer Trials or whatever, the first in that duology, and then I've also read Cemetery Boys, and he always has a little bit of like a romantic subplot.
This one just really didn't feel
like it was intentional, like it kind of got shoehorned in or something.
That's kind of what it felt like. And so I feel bad because I'm like, I don't know, maybe it was intended, and then I'm over here like, it didn't seem like they meant to do it because it wasn't as well fleshed out as it should be or something. But maybe other people really like it. I don't know. Because I went twice before. Roger, go ahead and give it a second one.
Okay, so I guess the other ones, I tend to be like Kristen, and I have movies that I watch kind of all religiously for like the Halloween season. So I always watch Hocus Pocus and The Nightmare Before Christmas, and I've read the novelized sequel of Hocus Pocus and the novelized sequel to The Nightmare Before Christmas.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
So there's literally one called like Hocus Pocus the sequel. And it's very cute. It does not follow the same story as Hocus Pocus 2, the movie that got released on Disney Plus. It's a different story, but it's still the same fun shenanigans of the Sanderson sisters being kind of horrible at being witches, but also trying to be like evil and suck the life out of children. So like, it's still a good time. And then the other one is Long Live the Pumpkin Queen. I think it's by Shay Earnshaw or something like that. Some author that I've heard the name of before, but it follows Sally after the events of The Nightmare Before Christmas, and she accidentally opens the door to Dreamland and releases the Sandman. And so there's kind of some hijinks, and you get to visit all of the other holiday worlds. You get to go see the Easter world and Valentine's world and like all of these different holiday worlds that you saw the doors of in the movie. You actually get to visit in the book. But it's definitely one of those ones that it relies on you kind of having buy into the characters from loving the movie first. I don't think that if you try to read it kind of out of context, it would be that good. It kind of definitely relies on hitting the like 90s and 2000s children who are obsessed with The Nightmare Before Christmas. But if you are one of those people, it's definitely worth picking up.
I have to read that.
Slash.
I read one of her other books. I read, what was it called? It was kind of actually Hocus Pocus like, and would be good for fall too. It had 3 like witches, the Sparrow sisters, and they were in like this town, and they would like haunt the town every like couple of summers or something.
It's driving me Wicked Deep.
Wicked Deep, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I read that and I liked it until the epilogue, and then I was like, no. It was one of those sorts of situations, but it definitely is a good fall read, and it has less of a forest atmosphere but very ocean oriented because they like lure men to the sea to drown. Is the whole thing. Yeah, but I never read the wood one. What's the one about the woods?
Winterwood. I read that one. That one I didn't like as much as the Wicked Deep. I honestly am like struggling to even remember what happened. I think that there was like definitely took place in the winter. I think someone gets like lost out in like a snowstorm or something, and then I remember I didn't really like it, so that's probably why I blocked it out of my mind.
There's 2, right? Was there a duology? I
think she wrote adult books too. Maybe that was the duology.
Okay. I was going to add though, Roger, to your when you were describing the certain generation that would love The Nightmare Before Christmas, I was going to be like slash the generation that played Kingdom Hearts, because isn't there a Nightmare Before Christmas part?
In the first 2, there's a Nightmare Before Christmas world.
Yeah. Kingdom Hearts is one of those franchises that I played the first one. I remember getting like the hard ending and being all excited, but it's taken so long for the sequels that now I'm like, I don't even really look, because I'm like, it's
so convoluted. Like if you actually try to figure out what the heck is even like the through story, you're like, what?
Which is why the person with Final Fantasy VII, the fact that they're remaking them and that person's involved, I'm like, oh geez, it's already a really bizarre plot line and we have to make it more bizarre.
Yeah, because I remember even messaging you, I was like, I feel like I'm lost. Like, what is happening in this game in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or whatever?
When we did our husbando ranking for FMA, we had like Sephiroth on there, and I was like, he's got to be bottom tier. He's got like terrible motives, and Sean was like, I don't really know what his motives are. I was like, I know.
Alex had to explain it to me because I was like, why? What?
Did you finish the original or no?
No.
Okay, it's the polygons couldn't keep your attention.
We haven't started it yet.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll go back to books though. And since we're talking about nostalgia and things that a lot of times I would say people are really into the movies, we have Kiki's Delivery Service, which is about the cutest thing ever, and then Howl's Moving Castle. I do like the movie more for this one. This one, it's pretty true. So what's fun is that this was written by someone who her daughter had these cute little illustrations. And so she sort of made up a story to fit her daughter's illustrations. And I don't think they're like literally her daughter's illustrations, but there are the occasional illustrations in the book, which is really cute. I found a really boring one. But there are like the little cat, for anybody that doesn't know, there's a cat that is Kiki's basically like familiar, and its name is Gigi. And so the page break is like a little cat. I don't know if you can see it, but it's very cute.
I see it's a little
anyway. It's absolutely precious. I love Kiki's Delivery Service. I think it's so cute. And then Howl's Moving Castle is just the most whimsical, eccentric story. And I love Sophie so much. And she's so charming, especially the voice actor for old Sophie is so good. It's so cute. I love it. Now I just want to talk about Studio Ghibli, but this is focus. So I'll just keep it to Kiki's Delivery Service. I can't talk.
You guys all have the wrong opinion that Spirited Away is not amazing, which rude.
I never said it's not good. I just don't like it as much as some of the others. I am a big Princess Mononoke fan myself, and I do like Kiki's Delivery Service and House Moving Castle. And Whisper of the Heart is absolutely precious and
So
silly. It's so cute. After I watched it, I messaged Roger and our other friend, and I was just like, if you need a just precious feel-good movie, which she's like, stupid jerk, stupid jerk, stupid jerk. It's so fun. I love that movie. Anyway, Kristen, what's your next rec?
I'm tempted to go off book since you just mentioned Studio Ghibli, because if you like those, there's a middle grade series by Julie Abbey called Eva Evergreen. And those are so much fun. It's a duology. And there's one book that's also like a prequel that you can read if you want to. And Eva is a witch. She's very similar to Kiki in a lot of ways, but it is also very much its own story. So she has a mom that is like one of the best witches ever. And Eva herself like kind of struggles with using her magic. She's not able to like do as much. And she goes to this town to try to like help the town, and people have all of these like big expectations of her because of who her mom is, and she kind of learns that even though her magic is different, like she still is valuable and still has a lot to contribute. So it's really cute, and she has a little familiar that's a fox. It actually kind of looks like an Eevee from Pokemon. It's so cute and just so like feel good.
It sounds very similar to Kiki's Delivery Service, but it sounds really cute. That art is adorable.
Yeah, I think you would like it if you like Studio Ghibli, which you obviously do.
I love it. I am, just because you said it, the correct way. I always am like, but the name it's kind of confusing because the original word that I think he was using it's like an Italian aircraft thing, right? Which was Ghibli. But then in Japanese, if you go like the way they spell it, then the translation back to English ends up being more like how you pronounced it. But I'm like, but the other one, so I never know what like the actual thing is. And so apologies. I've seen things online before that are like, take a step back if you hear anybody say Ghibli. And I'm just like,
what? That's silly. I mean,
like, you're not a real fan. But it makes me sad because I'm like, I don't know. I've looked into it and I don't know what the right answer is.
I feel like I used to say Ghibli like years and years and years ago. And then I kind of like trained myself to say Ghibli because that's what people kept telling me was correct. So that's why I would just say it like that now. But I mean, people know what you're talking about no matter which one you say. So
I saw a reel or YouTube short, I don't know which one it was, but I saw somebody being like, the reason why saying Ghibli is actually correct. And then they were explaining the history of the origin of the studio. And then the comments were like, no, you're completely wrong. And I'm just like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. I swear I try to see the right answer. Anyway, Roger, what's your next recommendation?
The next one I'll go back to a more nostalgic feeling one, and that's The Extraordinary Disappointments of Leopold Berry. It's a new, I think it's probably middle grade or very younger YA by Ransom Riggs, the author who wrote the Miss Peregrine's Peculiar Home or whatever. And it follows this boy whose mom has passed before the start of the story, and he's kind of going through his grieving process. And he has been told by doctors and his dad that that he sees these kind of weird visions of this like mechanical raccoon that sometimes catches on fire that's related to this fantasy VHS show that his mom used to play for him as a kid. And so he's being convinced that he's going crazy, but he ends up kind of going into this hidden magical world of Sunder World, which is the name of the series, and kind of gets caught up in stuff there. And for me, it always feels kind of fall vibes because something about the way Ransom Riggs does stuff has that kind of Tim Burton kind of like eerie vibe to it, where his Miss Peregrine series is more like X-Men, but if Tim Burton made it. And then this is more kind of like if Tim Burton did a fantasy version of Stranger Things, because you're kind of getting wrapped up and there's this weird, mysterious force doing things in the magical world and you kind of get embroiled in events there. But it's so good. It's so good.
I like the cover a lot.
Yeah, it's supposed to look like a VHS tape. Yeah.
What was the era? So because VHS tape, is it
late
more,
90s,
you
early
said Stranger?
2000s probably is the
Okay.
vibe of this one, not 80s.
Okay.
Because there's cell phones and stuff like that.
I have to say, the thing that has kept me from ever trying Stranger Things is I don't know what it is. I hate that era of, not like I hate things from that era or anything like that, but any kind of story where it's like, it's the 80s. I don't know why. It just, I feel like it leans into the whole, it's the 80s too much almost always. And then I'm like, I get it. They're like, look at how different before we had technology and stuff it was. I don't know. I feel like they lean too hard. And that's always been why I can't. I'm sure Stranger Things is fantastic. I just am like, I just know I'll be annoyed. Some of it is, some of it's not.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Season 4 is really good.
It was supposed to be only like 3 seasons, and then it was so popular, so they just keep writing more seasons. And at this point, it's like there's been such a big gap, and the way that the last one ended, it's like, okay, so now we're gonna have a new season. These kids are gonna have aged like 10 years. And how are we going to go right back to what happened?
Yeah, I don't know how that's going to work.
Isn't Millie Bobby Brown married or engaged now? Yeah. So she's going to go from like, I'm a child to I'm old enough to be married, but I'm pretending I'm a child, which is very reminiscent of our teenage years watching actors pretend to be children. There's like 25-year-olds that are like, I'm 16 in high school. Anyway. Kristen, what's your next recommendation?
Let's see. My next one is a romance series, paranormal romance. So the X-Hex and the Kiss Curse are currently out, and the third book, The Wedding Witch, is coming out in October. And this is really fun. Each of them are companion novels, so they follow like a different couple. I read the first one, and I'm actually in the middle of reading the second one now, and I think the second one is better than the first one so far. So in the first book, we're following a witch named Vivian, and she gets broken up with by her boyfriend, and she's like really upset. So she ends up like getting drunk, and she tries to put a hex on him, but she's, you know, kind of like stumbling. So she uses like a Bath and Body Works candle, and she assumes that he's probably like not really going to get hexed because a Bath and Body Works candle like isn't really going to do the job. But he moves away. His family is also very powerful warlocks. And then he is coming back to town to recharge their ley lines. And all of these like calamities keep happening, and the town becomes like under attack, and he is super hexed, and the two of them have to work together to try to like break the curse and save the town. So it's really cute. And then in the second one so far, we're following the cousin who was also in book one and the brother of the love interest from book one. They're just fun, like, you know, not too serious, not serious at all, really, just fun romance.
I read the first one, and it's good to know that you feel the second one's better, because I don't think by any means the first one was bad, but it really was just kind of like a fun time. Right. And I think I was wanting just a little bit more out of it. But if you are in the mood for something that's just pure shenanigans and silliness and a romance, that definitely has it. What do you think of the second one? Do you feel like it still fits that, or do you feel like what about it makes it better in your opinion?
I don't know if it's that maybe this is like her second romance novel, so she has a little bit more experience writing. It's still the same kind of like non-serious shenanigans, but I'm liking the characters more. I'm not really sure, but
that can make a big difference in a romance story. Because their personalities are often, besides the romance, one of the big driving factors.
So true.
I'll go next, and I feel like this is also an overused recommendation on my end, but I don't even care. Witch Hat Atelier is a manga series. Yeah, of course, it had to appear at some point. I love it so much. I'm so excited because there's going to be an anime adaptation coming out in 2025, and for whatever reason, I like want to cry when I watch the trailer, which makes no sense because there's nothing sad about it. I just get so excited. It looks so, and the music is so good. Oh. Anyway, so it seems as if it's just cute, but then as you progress through the story, the themes they're not necessarily so front and center. I do think that if you, not to say like kids are stupid or anything like that, but I think like a younger child could easily read this series and it would be age appropriate, but that some of the themes maybe wouldn't quite settle in as much as it does for an older audience. But it starts out with a young girl named Coco who just loves magic, and in their world, from her understanding, only people born with magic can become witches. And that kind of gets flipped on its head when she watches a witch perform magic and then maybe learns a little bit of their secrets. And typically, when their secrets are revealed, they're not supposed to be able to hold on to the memory of that secret. Usually, it's supposed to be wiped. But instead of that happening this time around, the person who she witnessed using magic takes her under his wing, and she kind of gets whisked off to an atelier to learn about magic. And it does start kind of cutesy. It does sort of seem like it's just going to be, now I'm learning about this spell and now I'm going to this place. But as it progresses, it starts to really develop a lot, and that there's so many things involving the adults of the story where you're like, oh, this is getting kind of serious. And when you see how it trickles down to all of society, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so tragic. And
it gets pretty dark with the creepy like, leech monsters and stuff.
Yeah, and because there's a full range of ages in this, you have the adults and then you have the children, but then you have like the elderly as well. And you really kind of see the mentor-mentee relationship and how it can be so enriching, but also what can happen when you do not have a good mentor figure. And those elements are really devastating. And also the idea of who gets to use magic and what magic gets used for. There are questions that arise from that, and there are some antagonists that, as the story progresses, you're like, I kind of see why they feel the way they feel. So there's a lot of moral ambiguity. It's great. And the art, which usually is the thing I start with, but I saved it so I can talk about the premise more. But the art in this is so unbelievably beautiful, so charming and magical. The paneling is great. Oh my gosh. It just takes forever for the volumes to come out. And I'm like, I get it because the art's so good. I just don't, I hate having to wait for more.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's so good. Roger, do you want to hype up Witch Hat anymore, or you want to move on?
It is really good.
It's so good.
I guess one that I feel is kind of witchy vibes. It's not my favorite book, but I feel like it fits the prompt, is Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. But it is kind of that small town murder mystery. There are potentially witchy elements to it. I remember feeling it tried to do too much because it's also like second chance romance and murder mystery and like fall vibes. And like it's a little bit, it tries to do a lot, but if you want kind of just are there for the vibes and don't really care as much, or maybe you're like really into second chance romance, I think it could work for you. Like I've heard some people really like it. For me, it was like kind of mid because I wanted it to be more witchy than it was. But I still think it fits like the fall witchy vibe really good.
I think that Adrienne Young, she has another book that I recommend as well, and it's got a similar cover. I'm totally spacing
on The Making of June Farrow.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, her writing almost, I think, leans more into if a book was formally considered fiction instead of considered fantasy. I think it's almost like fantasy for the fiction reader in a sense. Of course, anybody can pick it up and enjoy it. But to your point, Roger, because we basically buddy read that, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think both of us were kind of like, so what's up with the magic? Like we're wanting to know more. And it does, I think, embrace more of the contemporary feel to it.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of like practical magic levels of magic, where you're like, is it magic? Yeah, there is some, but it's not really. And it's not really the point. It's more about the like generational thing and the sister relationship. It's kind of the same with this. It's more about her second chance rekindling some romance with this guy and kind of the broader dynamics of the town than it is about like the witchiness, which I kind of wanted more of the witch vibe, but that's okay. I
actually just DNF'd that.
Spells for Forgetting?
Yeah, because I was like, the atmosphere like is so good, and I was really enjoying that, but I was like, I really don't care about these characters, so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna move on.
And it's so frustrating because, like you said, the setting is great and the atmosphere is great, and I like her writing.
Especially in the beginning. when she was focusing on setting up the atmosphere of the island, it was like so kind of eerie and like very fall vibes. And then it kind of, we stopped focusing on that as much. Definitely. That's probably when you got bored. Kristen, you're like, I'm out.
I'm going to go back to me and then Kristen will switch to you. I'm going to recommend 2 books that these didn't necessarily perfectly work for me, but depending on what you're looking for, they could really work for you. One of them was incredibly moving, and I feel like a lot of people are going to really like it. And I've actually recommended it to you, Roger, which would be The Lost Story. This is a story where it doesn't necessarily have the fantasy magic system or anything like that. It feels very off the cuff almost. And that actually does make sense once you learn more about the lore and the creation of the magic of this world. But it's starting out in our world, and you find out that these 2 young men, when they were boys, went missing, and then they appeared again after being gone for a long amount of time. And one of them can't remember anything that happened. The other one can, but won't tell them, which has had a huge strain on their friendship. But the one who does remember things suddenly now has the ability, an uncanny ability, to find missing people. And so we enter in a third perspective, a character who is looking for, or at least wants to find out, what happened to her sister years ago. And so these 3 kind of come together and they go to the place that the young men, when they went missing, where they went. And then from there, it gets kind of more magic leaning. It has definitely some fairy tale ingredients, but it's very self-aware because the narrator of the story is oftentimes kind of having almost like interludes where they start to talk to you about things that are going on. And it has a very sugary, sweet sort of feeling to it. But then the themes and the hard-hitting moments are really tragic, and they're done really well. And I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people. It's one of the reasons I've recommended it to you, Roger. But it gets to be
I'm just
very,
waiting for
very
it from the
sad.
library because it seems to be very popular.
Yeah,
maybe,
I think because
maybe when I move, my new library system will be, maybe it'll be less
Are you
popular.
waiting for the audiobook or are you waiting for the physical copy? Because I can
neither. I think I'm waiting for the ebook.
Oh, I can just send this to you. You'd probably get it from me before you'd get it from your library.
Yeah, because I think it still has several months wait.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Once you know for sure how to write out your new address, since the whole like building versus number kind of thing, then you can tell me and then I'll send it your way. The other one that didn't quite work for me, but just depends on your level of how much you like the atmosphere versus the writing versus the characters, would be The Honey Witch. So in this one, we follow a young woman who is living within what is basically like a Regency era setting, and she just does not feel inclined toward the life of being a wife and a mother and this proper lady. She wants to be living among nature, and she just feels this pull to something. And her grandmother explains to her one day that she is part of a line of witches, and she decides to pursue that life for herself. She starts out very, very unlikable, as she is very judgmental to anybody who chooses to go about their own lives in a different way than how she wants to live hers. But she starts to grow and learn throughout the story, and there is definitely a sense of found family. The only reason it didn't really work for me is that not the only reason, but there's kind of an odd mix of who the antagonist is, when they show up, and how that's kind of paced throughout the story. There is also a romance in that, and that's sort of tied into some of the other elements that I wish had been fleshed out a little bit more. But I still liked the other character, the love interest character, and the other individual that's sort of part of the found family. The parts that have to do with her grandmother, for me, were the best parts of the book. But I do think it doesn't quite lean into cozy as strong as other cozy books. Doesn't quite lean into witchy as much as other witchy books. But similar to what we were all saying about Adrienne Young, it just depends on how much of what you're looking for. That one could end up being something that really does work for you. But Kristen, since I skipped over you a second ago, we'll jump back to one of your recommendations.
Okay, so my next one I have a physical copy of is Masters of Death by Olivia Blake. This one is really funny. It follows Viola, who is a struggling real estate agent, and she's also a vampire, and she's trying to sell a haunted house. But unfortunately, the ghost that is haunting the house that she's trying to sell was murdered, and he refuses to leave until somebody solves his murder. So Viola enlists the help of Fox, who is a medium, and he's also the godson of death, and he's also a shameless fraud, to try to help exorcise the ghost. and then the pair of them end up on like an unexpected quest. So if you have watched or read and really enjoyed Good Omens, this is very similar in vibe. I had no idea that the story was going to go in the direction that it did, but it was really fun. I find that Olivia Blake is a really hit or miss for me. I either like really love her books or really, really dislike them. And this one was a really big win for me.
Didn't that even happen to you within like her like series? Didn't you like love one of them, then hated the next one? And then...
Yes. I love the Atlas 6 and I hate the Atlas Paradox. It was awful.
Oh no.
Yeah,
I still need to read the Atlas Paradox. I'm kind of scared to though, because it seemed like so many people had a similar experience. But I feel bad because her works from one to the next are so different from each other. So I think I have just picked up, because I read the Atlas 6 and I've been scared to read more. And then I decided like, let me try something else by that author. And I tried, the Romeo and Juliet one. What is it called?
One for My Enemy.
Yes, thank you. And I don't know, I didn't know it was Romeo and Juliet / West Side Story, and I hate that story so much. So when I picked it up, I was like, oh, well, I don't know, maybe it'll work out. And I'm like, it's not working out. But that's not really the author's fault. It's more that I hate that story. So hearing Masters of Death, that you really enjoyed it, first off, the premise sounds really funny. I don't think I actually knew what it was about. And second, I actually think it's helpful to hear that the author is hit or miss for you also, because it's like Naomi Novik for me with, I didn't like Uprooted at all. And then I loved Spinning Silver. So sometimes it can be kind of refreshing to hear when things are hit or miss for other people.
I just remember because I was living vicariously through one of Kristen's book hauls, and she like had just hauled like the beautiful edition. I don't remember if it's Fairy or Lumicrid or something of like the second book. And she's like, it's so pretty, but I hate this book, but it's so pretty.
I know, because you had to order them so far in advance. So like I pre-ordered it before it came out, and then I read the ebook while I was waiting for that to arrive, and I was like, great, I can't wait to have 3 copies of this terrible book.
I rarely pre-order things these days unless it's a sequel or it's an author that's pretty hit for me. So because of that, like being burned on those sorts of things. But I feel like that's how you don't even have to know. It's like, there was another one that Fairy Loot did where I feel like everybody's like, oh, it looks so beautiful, I have to have it. And then no one liked it. I don't remember what it was though. Oh my gosh, it's like the Book of Night situation where every book box made Book of Night and everybody's like, I'm going to get all the editions. It's Holly Black. And then it was nobody liked it. I feel bad. I don't know what happened. Anyway. Roger, what's your next recommendation?
I'll do Long Live Evil. It just came out, I think in August or something like that. It is very much tongue-in-cheek, like campy as all anything type of story. It starts kind of dark though, because you follow this woman who has terminal cancer and she's dying, and she gets this opportunity where this enigmatic figure kind of appears in her hospital room and tells her, if you go to this magical world that is this story that her and her sister had told each other and like read this like series to each other, and they both love this like fantasy story. And so she finds out that she can actually go to that fantasy world, and she has to acquire this flower and it could help save her life. But when she gets transported there, she gets transported into the body of this villain in the story, who's obviously the over-sexualized female antagonist with the huge breasts and like all of the like ridiculousness. But it leans really hard into it, and I think it's very self-aware. So it almost feels to me kind of like Elvira. I don't know if you ever watched the movie Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. It's kind of like that, but if Elvira was in the Neverending Story, because now all of a sudden she's transported into this book world and trying to like figure it out, but the story that she thought she knew is not what's really happening in the world. So she's kind of like having to navigate that. I think that the marketing though really pushes that it's like, now it's the villain's turn, but she's really like a good person at heart, and like you kind of want to root for her. She just happens to be in the body of a villain in the story. And she like sometimes toys with the idea of like, ooh, I could be really evil here. She never really does it though. So like, I feel like the marketing is a little bit misleading, because I was like, come on, be evil. But she like kind of tap dances around it a little bit, but it's still really good. And then I really appreciated reading, because it's one of those ones where you read the author's note and it gives you context that the author was actually doing her own battle with cancer when she wrote this story. So I think it's kind of like, it gives you interesting context that it's kind of like it helped heal her from her cancer. Writing about this person with terminal cancer, I think it also has a little bit more impact than just the kind of camp factor that you would kind of expect from reading the blurb and stuff.
I do want to read that. I just need a break from another book that came out recently that has a similar premise. That is not something I enjoyed at all, but that's not on the recommendations today. Kristen, if you don't know, How to Become the Dark Lord or Die Trying
is Elle's new favorite book.
Might just be my least favorite thing I have ever read.
Really?
I knew by page 2, and I was like, you know what, we're gonna buckle in for this.
When it was the footnote, right? It was the footnote about like he wears his armor all the time. How does he poop? I need to know how he poops. So it was like the footnote.
No, not that. The footnote beneath it, or right before it, that was talking about wondering what the person who's torturing her, who has like a snake body and snake tongue, wondering like, I wonder what it would feel like if they went down on me. And she was just like, oh my gosh. Like I just instantly was like, oh no, what is this?
That's very upsetting to hear because I just had a friend convince me to buy that because she liked it. So
well, I'm glad your friend enjoyed it.
Something that I would enjoy.
I'm glad your friend enjoyed it.
That doesn't sound like something I would recommend to you.
Well, you know, it's funny because I'm not opposed to vulgar humor, stupid humor, campy humor. And I have watched so much stand-up comedy because I'm like, I never know how people think I am, you know, how you come across. I'm like, I wonder if some people think I'm a giant square, you know, but I'm like, I do genuinely, I mean, like, Age of Madness by Joe Abercrombie is super vulgar and I think it's super funny. But this for me, it was the same joke over and over again. The story basically goes, she meets some kind of being and then she wonders how they have sex. And if she's not wondering that, she's just thinking like, OMG, they're so cute. Like they'll have like little ears or something. And she talks like that. That's not even an exaggeration. And then it's just her like talking about wanting to sleep with someone, and because she can't right now, it's like, I'll just have to do it to myself. And it's just like constant. And I'm like, oh my God, I get it. So it wasn't my favorite. It was a library book. I took so many pictures because I couldn't tab it. And I'm like, maybe one day I'll do a review. But if I do, I think I will. I'm like, I don't know how even to do that. Cause I'm like, can I even post that video? Would YouTube take it down?
Demonetized immediately.
Yeah. I told my mom about it because I read the book while I was dog sitting her dog. And so she was like, we were chatting and I was filling her in on the dog. And she's like, how is it? I'm like, oh, just hanging out, reading. I was like, I read a book I didn't really like. And I told her about one line where the characters are like cheering, or other people are cheering on the main character. And she's like, yeah, I just want to stick my hand down my pants right now. And my mom's like, oh my gosh. And then my mom's like, I look forward to your review. And I was
it's
like,
going to be your new favorite book, Kristen. I've also just heard a lot of people take issue with the fact that it's kind of like harmful man writing bisexual woman, that just because she's bi doesn't mean she's horny all the time.
It is kind of that stereotype that I didn't love that. Anyway, I didn't love anything about it. So,
but Along with Evil is like that, but if it was done well and not just like crass to be crass, it's very like meta and self-aware where they make fun of different like tropes, and like I think you'll like it a lot more.
I think I will too, but because Kristen,
it's hard to like it less.
the general premise is similar, where somebody is, you know, essentially now the villain of this world. It's a very self-aware book, and maybe are they the villain? Oh, I don't know, you know, but it just doesn't seem like, I hope you like it. I'm glad your friend liked it.
You really sold it, so.
Yeah. I'm just going to go through my last few pretty quick, just because it's been over an hour, and I was just counting because I've been writing them out as we go. We've had over 20 now that we've mentioned, but the last 3, Roger, I feel like would probably have mentioned The Spell Shop because it's so cute, and Legends and Lattes, I just realized have like the same color palette, but these are both just perfect, cozy fall reads. I mean, Legends and Lattes obviously has the like coffee shop feel, and Bookshops and Bone Dust does as well. I always say Bookshops and Bone Dust feels like a love letter to bookworms, but they're both so cute, and I don't really think I probably have to say too much about it because I feel like everybody knows about it. And The Spell Shop is a little bit newer. I think the marketing has really hit that it's her romantasy debut, but I honestly think it just is also cozy. And yes, there is a romance present. There's a romantic subplot, but it's not really the main focus of the story. And you follow this young woman who just loves her books, and she loves her sentient spider plant, who was there with her as she was a librarian, but the library has burned down, and she just grabs some books and goes. And then she realizes that she could actually get in trouble for having done this. So now she's fearful with where she ends up fleeing to, that somebody's going to tell on her or she's going to get in trouble. But she's also like, but if it's a new government, then maybe they'll be really grateful that I saved the books. I don't know, but she can't really get information in this small town that she's fled to. And the small town happens to also be where she grew up. So we're exploring a lot of her memories of her childhood and grieving the people that were in her life before. It tackles loneliness, and just, it does also have the whole found family component to it. And then the last one, this has been one of my favorite books I've read this year as far as new fantasy goes. I did end up getting an edition that's not the normal cover, but Foul Days. And I realized that the sequel is coming out this year also. It's just going to be a duology. And because this is also a witchy recommendations, the main character in this is a witch. And the way that their society is set up is there's two cities that are separated by a wall. And the wall keeps the monsters out of the nice city, but the monsters still wreak havoc in the city our main character is from. And she's a witch, so she is very capable of dealing with these enemies. However, witches get their power from their shadows. And because of a desperate thing that has occurred, she ends up giving up her shadow to seek safety. And now she's trying to get her shadow back. But at the same time, there is still the threat of monsters. So she's trying to use her knowledge, even though she doesn't have her magic, to try to combat. And she ends up teaming up with a very square detective who's very by the books, but maybe sometimes breaks the rules. And they're working together to not only get her shadow back, but also kind of solve. It's almost murder mystery-esque. And there's a lot of monsters in it as well, which is really fun. It was so fun. I really liked it. I had such a good time. Definitely.
That one I have 8 weeks left.
Yay!
I never heard of that one.
Oh, it was so fun. It only recently came out, but I really, really liked it. The setting is a little, it threw me off because when you first start, you're in the city that she's in, but you do at some point go to the city on the other side of the wall. And then there's like trains and voice recorders and stuff. So I was like, oh, wait, that's not what I expected at all. So it's like you start getting used to one setting and then you're realizing like, this isn't quite the same, but makes sense because she's never been to that side of the city. So you're surprised alongside her. But it's a lot of fun. It's a tiny, 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 tiny bit reminds me of Anastasia, just with
fun.
how the, a little bit how like the villain is done and the setting itself being a little more advanced than what you usually see in fantasy. But I don't want to give anybody the wrong impression. I'm not saying it's like, if you like Anastasia, you'll like this. But it is really fun. And it's like, the humor is really cheeky. I really, really liked it. Highly, highly recommend. Anyway, did either of you have any last recommendations you wanted to throw out there? Or you feel like you're pretty good?
I have one more. I specifically did not do Witch Hat because I knew that you were going to talk about it.
I know, same thing. I didn't even put it on my list. I was like, Al's doing Witch Hat.
Yeah, and Roger, I thought you were going to do Spell Shop, so it
was on my list.
Well.
It was on my list.
But I have a graphic novel recommendation. It's called Over My Dead Body by Sweeney Boo. So if you're looking for something like shorter with absolutely gorgeous autumnal illustrations, this is definitely something to check out. It takes place at Yunwitty's Institute of Magic and the Forbidden Forest that is like just beyond the grounds. And it takes place leading up to the holiday Samhain, when the veil between the living and the dead is the thinnest. And it follows Abby, whose roommate and best friend Noreen has gone missing. And Abby seems to be the only one that is taking the disappearance very seriously. Everyone else is kind of like preoccupied with getting things ready for the celebration. And the rest of the students are like, oh, the coven in charge will take care of it. They're on it. And Abby is like, no, I have to find her. So Abby starts doing some like investigating on her own. And she realizes that Noreen's disappearance might be connected to a similar disappearance that happened to another student many years before. And she starts kind of uncovering some secrets within the school. And the illustrations are really just absolutely gorgeous.
Are the ones that are showing up, are these accurate?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Those look so nice.
Yeah. It's like a work of art.
Yeah,
It's really
yeah.
beautiful.
It looks, I now definitely want to try to find this. I really like that art a lot. Maybe my husband and I can read it together because he's a fan of graphic novels also.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Roger, do you have any final recommendations?
The
Are you
only,
gonna?
the only other one I had on my list was the Shades of Magic series by V.E. Schwab. I feel like kind of fits the vibe, blood magic. I feel like we have all talked about it probably ad nauseum, but if you haven't read the Shades of Magic series now, I guess, or threads of whatever it is, it's great. And especially book one is like perfect fall vibes when you're kind of figuring out this like sinister underplot of like what had happened to this previous London and trying to figure out more about the magic and then learning more about Kel and his magic. I think it has the right vibes for this season.
I was about to type it in and I was like, everybody knows what Shades of Magic is. I don't need to put that up on the screen.
You should put up the new covers only, Elle, because it's your favorite.
Yeah. I will say, I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to imply that people have some like ulterior motives for not liking it or something, but I don't feel like it gets as much love on BookTube as a lot of the other sort of household name books household name like authors. And V. Schwab seems to be a household name at this point, but not necessarily as loved on BookTube. I think there was a time like Vicious was definitely really popular on BookTube and Shades of Magic was popular at a certain time. And then I feel like there was weird, not quite backlash because people weren't passionately hating on them. It was just kind of like, I just think it's like a little overrated. And I've always been surprised by that. So I think I like them. I liked them more on reread, to be honest.
She's such a, yeah, me too. When we reread them, that was so much fun. But she's such a brilliant writer. And I feel like pretty much everything that she writes is very fitting for autumn and always has some kind of like undercurrent of creepiness to it. And she just writes so beautifully.
Yes, I completely agree. There is something about her voice. And I think there's just something kind of like sinister about her writing, even when the premise is totally different. By the way, I just wanted to show, since this is Foul Days again, but since this is a special edition, like the artwork on it is really, well, that's not necessarily artwork. You know what I mean? And then the dust jacket, if you like reverse it, it looks super cool.
Oh, wow.
So I'm holding it upside down. I just realized because I'm stupid.
I didn't even know this.
They're like trying to take a hot air balloon back to the other side of the city. Wow. Anyway, so I thought I would show you. Yeah. Anyway, this was so fun. It was nice catching up. It was nice chatting about a bunch of fall books. I'm glad. I was worried that we would have a lot of overlap, and I'm glad that.
Well, I intentionally tried to pick ones that I either haven't talked about much or I have never talked to you about. So I was like, okay, we probably don't have overlap.
Yeah, I tried to like go by things that I like tried to predict things that I thought you guys would talk about and then picked other things.
Which that was the easiest one to predict though.
Yeah. Irregular Witches, you had it too, Kristen, but I got to talk about it first.
You're the only other person that I've also heard compare it to House in the Cerulean Sea, because that's how I compare it too.
How does no one else do that though? That is what it's like.
I think so too.
That's bizarre.
I mean, maybe they just don't know. Maybe they haven't read the greatness that is the House in the Cerulean Sea.
Are you excited for the sequel, by the way, Kristen? That's coming out on Tuesday.
Extremely, yeah.
Well, you and Roger can have fun. I didn't love it, but
because she doesn't like Linus, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
He's the main character, right?
Yeah. And then Arthur is the love interest.
Arthur. I always get it mixed up. And I always say Lionel. That's not his name. But you know what? It's impressive that impressive to me, to no one else, that I kind of remember his name, because I feel like I never remember anybody's names. But, oh well. Like, as we discussed today when we were going through, I'm like, what's that book called? So, I don't even remember.
At least Kristen always knows.
Yeah.
I like having a good memory for book titles, but characters, not so much.
Yeah, characters are a no from unless they're really distinct. But I'm not kidding, and this is embarrassing. There have been times where I'm like I'm plotting something with my own book story, and I'm just like, what's my character's name again? Not like the main ones, but the like, more side character ones. Or I'm like, wait, what's the name of the city again? And it's like, I swear I know my story inside and out. I'm just so bad with names. But if you like mention a day that we've hung out or something, if we hung out in person, I can probably tell you what I was wearing. So like my memory is it's stupid good with really unimportant things, and then things that actually matter. It's like, yeah, well, who needs this? It's very frustrating. Oh well. Anyway, this is lots of fun. I wrote out all of the book titles, so I'll try to have that in the description bar in case anybody was like, oh, what was the name of that book again? And then also a reminder that all of the profits from merch sales goes to charity, so definitely check out the merch. It would help a lot. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks to Kristen and Roger for joining. We'll be back for creepier, scarier book recs for the fall. Anyway, I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Bye.